Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in this world you are dialing in from. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to AI Unveiled, Decoding the Future webinar brought to you by Techstars and NVIDIA. My name is Tricia Martinez. I am a managing director at Techstars, running a few of our accelerators, including our Chicago AI and Deep Tech program powered by JP Morgan. And I am crazy obsessed with far out ideas that can change our world and solve really big global problems. I'm looking for those wild founders who want to solve problems from climate change to cancer, to disease and famine. Everything and anything like that really excites me. And I know it excites my wonderful friend, Chris, who I'm joined by today. Chris Brown is the head of the NVIDIA Inception program. We love talking AI, startups, and the future. And so I'm really excited to have him here today. It's going to be a great conversation. Chris, how are you? Do you want to give a quick intro of yourself and what you've been up to?
Yeah, no, it's cool that we're doing this again. I hope we make it sort of a regular thing. And it's always, super fun to talk with you about all this stuff, as we were alluding to, like the ideas around AI and how this is evolving is, I think the most exciting thing in tech right now. In terms of our world, like I help lead the ecosystem side at Inception. So I focus really on a lot of broad engagement with the community, with startups, being able to help them understand all the different things that NVIDIA does and that Inception tries to do to help support startups as they utilize tools and technologies from NVIDIA. And one of the unique things is that since I joined, the change from people kind of knowing NVIDIA exists to now recognizing NVIDIA's sort of centrality to everything that a lot of folks are doing, especially, when it comes to AI and ML, has been a really fun change to be a part of and to see happen in real time.
Yeah, seriously, you've been at NVIDIA for a while, so you were like on this roller coaster ride.
It's
Like all
it's
the
it
crazy
it
hype
feels
of
like
like
a while, but it's only been
nobody,
3 years.
yeah,
It's somehow.
I know, and people in the space,
Yeah,
right? Like people who have been in AI, we all know who
yeah,
NVIDIA is, but then like now the world has been exposed to what AI is,
yeah,
so everyone's like, oh my gosh, you're at NVIDIA.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's the doors have started to open a lot more easily. Let's put it that way.
yes, absolutely. Okay, awesome. So, before we kick off in a exciting conversation, we are in a Zoom, LinkedIn Live. There are chat functions here, so feel free to post who you are, where you're dialing in from, and probably what you're building. I think most of you guys are founders, so we want to hear more about the things you're building. We'll also open it up to questions at the end, but Chris and I, yeah, I've put together a number of questions for Chris, so we'll have a conversation for some time. But feel free to hop in, and we'll get to the group questions in a little bit. So, um, I guess I wanted to kick it off by first like plugging our own program since we're both doing a lot of work in AI, and so I wanted to give the audience a some information about Inception. Like many companies on this call today are building an AI, they're exploring AI. How can they think about NVIDIA? What is the Inception program? What are those things, resources, tools? What is it that you guys do that you can help with really early stage or even later stage startup companies?
Absolutely. The unique thing about NVIDIA and specifically Inception is that we're not a transactional program in the way that a lot of the sort of large corporate programs are. I don't have a thing that I sell to startups, right? We're not even part of the sales team. We're really part of developer relations. And what that means is we want to help startups as they join NVIDIA, give them tools to test out, to understand what NVIDIA has, to understand the things that we have that might be able to make what they're doing already more efficient, more effective. And so they come in and they'll have access to things like our Deep Learning Institute, which is this amazing learning system that's been put together by our engineering teams that really help understand kind of key technologies related to NVIDIA, like the fundamentals of deep learning or recommender systems or computer vision or LLMs, like the building of all of those and what tools make sense to use to build with those. So it might be like, hey, you should be using TensorRT LLM, to optimize your generative models, or DeepStream to really quickly get a computer vision system, up and running. And that kind of is how we always think about things in Inception. It's use cases. What are the things that you're doing? And therefore, what are the tools that we have that can just plug right into what you're doing? So it's very much like a kind of consultative advisory type of program where you come in and you're like, hey, I need to learn about this and this, and then I need to test it out. So cool. Now you've got some cloud credits with our partners to be able to do that. And you've got the Deep Learning Institute to get up to speed. And then as you go down the line and you sort of really start scaling, like I said, we don't sell things, but you'll have preferred pricing from whoever you go out and buy stuff from. You might be investor connections as well. So all of those things really come into play. But it always starts with what are you doing from a technology perspective? Because NVIDIA is a beautifully nerdy company, and we always think about the technology first. And then from there, like, how do we support you as you grow beyond that? And that might be at early stage, you have those sort of starting points. At later stage, as a company progresses, relationships start to get developed with our industry business teams, with our solutions architects and developer relations teams. And those are really where people can get very like intense engagement with NVIDIA, and it's all based on how they're utilizing our tools and where they want to go with it.
Awesome. The thing that I hear most and what I've experienced in working with you guys is that you are definitely founder first, right? It's not,
Yeah,
hey, we're taking equity in your business, we're charging you for this. It's
yeah,
you guys are this resource. You want to help build the ecosystem. You want to help early
yeah,
stage, later stage AI companies. For our Techstars Chicago AI Accelerator last year, we had 12 companies that got to work with Chris. We actually made a trip out to the office in the Silicon Valley area. We got to tour the space, and luckily, all of our companies were building AI across healthcare, across drug discovery, across education and fintech. And Chris was amazing and connected our companies with individual industry leaders within those areas so that they could add value from whatever vertical they were building in. So I think, for founders on the call, NVIDIA is definitely the partner you want to work with. They provide so many resources. They just want to help. Whether you use their tools or not, like Chris really wants to help. He's like one of the most founder friendly people I know. And I'm so lucky that we get to work together because he really cares about helping great founders succeed.
well, I mean, I think that we're in the same boat, right? And it's been awesome to work with you because we've worked now on a couple different programs, right? There's also the Industries of
Yeah.
the Future one, and at every point I immediately got the sense like, oh yeah, no, Tricia gets it, right? This is somebody that I want to work with, and one of the incentives to being part of the TechStars program, like it's not every company gets to come out to HQ and meet these very, very unique folks, right? That are part of that. So that's very much a hey, because you're in Techstars and because you're able to, be connected to us through that, then these opportunities open up. So that's always something to think about as hopefully are applying to Tricia's program.
Absolutely. So I'll give a plug on that. We have open applications for the Techstars Chicago AI and Deep Tech program, which is powered by JP Morgan. We've pulled NVIDIA in as a partner, so we get to work closely with Chris and all the great people at NVIDIA. So if you're building across AI, or if you're not building AI and you're a deep tech company, so maybe you're a climate technology company or a biotech company, we want to talk to you. So technologies that are more scientific and addressing engineering related problems, more complex, maybe hardware. The harder, the better for us. If you're solving a big problem, that excites us. And Chris, I know NVIDIA does stuff in quantum and even like beyond
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah, that's what I was going to sort of like note is that the way that I used to describe it, back before AI was cool in like 2016 and things like that was we're going to look back at sort of the AI era as not a bunch of like nobody I believe has an AI startup, right? You have a startup that serves a particular set of customers and that serves an industry. And AI is a tool and a function within what you do that enhances your ability to support those customers and to build. And so, when you talk about like, oh, we've got quantum computing tools and we've got physics simulation and physics modeling tools. You talk about climate. We built I believe the world's largest supercomputer just focused on climate simulation and weather, right? Because we understand that all of these problems can be addressed by accelerated computing, right? And that's one of the nice parts about NVIDIA. You alluded to that we don't have like an ask out of this program, and that's because we recognize that everybody is already using our tools in one way or another. And so why not help them use them better? Why not help them save money on your cloud costs, or sort of get up to speed faster on different technologies that you're building? And it allows us to be very genuine and authentic with startups, because I don't have to be like, well, I can't help you because you're not buying $1 million worth of GPU widgets. It's like, that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is, are you building an amazing company, and can our tools support that in some way, right? And most of our software tools we just give away. We make a bunch of them open source, and so that's it allows us to work with startups in a way that is, I think, very different than people are used to. So it takes a little while for them to adjust, be like, wait, you're not trying to sell me anything? And I'm like, nope. So yeah.
Exactly. So, founders on this call, if you want to work with people who care, me, Chris, Anthony, Jessica, who are also on this call, our Techstars team members, you guys better apply to this program, because then you'll get to see our wonderful faces all the time, and we want to help you change the world. So
Absolutely.
that's even better. So you mentioned something, and I want to kind of kick off a conversation around like the hype, everything AI. Like, let's
Yeah.
dissect the industry, what's happening. You had said, not like, there is basically no AI company. And what's interesting is that like AI is becoming very vertical, right? It
Mhm.
is, to me, what the internet was. Right? Like, we will see every single company in the future integrating AI at some level within their operations,
Yeah.
within their backend infrastructure. But I think we're still at a point where it's like, because of marketing and being able to
Mhm.
stand out, companies are like, I'm AI for this, I'm AI for that.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
do also see like true AI companies, like, ML ops, and like
Yeah.
people building infrastructure that are
Yeah.
basically just trying to solve some of these problems. How are you looking at the market from that perspective? Like, do you think AI is vertical now? Do you think the futures, like the next 6 months, will look different? Like,
Mhm.
what are you seeing in the space with all the companies that come through Inception? And how do you like articulate what the space looks like right now?
Yeah. I think that if I think about the applications that come in, we do see a lot of sort of dev tools,
Mhm.
and things of that nature come in, and that is always going to be there, because there's always, hopefully, going to be improvements on the tools that allow people to, some of the recent ones I've seen, 3, 4 companies just in the last couple of months that are sort of automated identification and routing of different models, where they'll be like, hey, instead of calling out to ChatGPT and to Mistral and to Llama or whatever, it'll sort of do an analysis of what you're asking and then direct it out there. And like, that's just like one wave. And I think, to me, it's indicative of, okay, now it's like we've built a bunch of foundation models, and people will keep building those, as especially those who have unique data set access and stuff like that. But the part that's cool is that now we're getting to a point where these are the can I use the word abstraction without sounding kind of like VC douchey? These are the abstraction tools, right? That allow sort of enterprises and individual small businesses to more easily tap into this stuff, because a lot of the tools that initially have been built for, as you noted, like, an engineering type of approach, where it's like, yeah, say I'm an enterprise that doesn't have a boatload of like ML engineers and like, a bunch of data scientists that have the ability to use all these tools and really dive into them. Well, there should be GUIs for these things. Everybody should be able to tap into them, like, no matter what they're doing. So we'll see a lot of that, and I think we're going to see more refinement there. But on an industry perspective, stuff that we saw, what was it, last month? There was that the announcement that Klarna made around their customer service ops and what they were able to do
Mm.
there. I think we're going to see more and more of that, because that's an area that really automatically lends itself to it, because we've tried that. Every large corporation has tried to build in sort of customer service operations automation over the last 20 years, and it might be those horrible, like, voice interactions that you have on the phone where you're like, representative, right? And I believe we're going to get to a point where we no longer have to scream representative at our phone, because the sort of voice systems are not going to be nearly as incompetent as Klarna was already able to demonstrate. And so that's going to be anywhere where there's a huge cost center and massive sort of savings to be done, where you can really enhance the ability of your sort of customer service team to serve far more people, essentially giving them tools to scale without having to scale headcount. I think that's going to be a really key area. I think there's certainly going to be a lot of stuff around sort of data science. Like fintech always tends to like subtly lead the way, and I think as we start to get into the ability to tap LLMs into a lot of these sort of unstructured data that the Wall Street type companies have at their disposal, that's going to be a really interesting area. Healthcare, as you noted, is actually
That's I actually find that interesting because I feel like
yeah.
fintech, like I was a fintech founder, and
Mhm.
the last like 5 years, the space has just come so blah. Like
Yeah,
it's like you don't. I
and the
run a
numbers
fintech
bear that out.
accelerator.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I run a fintech accelerator focused on emerging markets, and it's awesome because emerging markets to me, like there's so many problems, so many new things happening. But in the U.S. and other developed markets, like it just feels kind of dead. Like the banks are still kind of running the show, and it feels like the
yeah.
fintechs will have failed at truly competing. And so I don't know if we're going to see that much innovation in that space. I agree with you from like
Maybe not on a startup
trading.
perspective, but I think the large corps are actually
Okay,
going to be
true.
able to use their huge amounts of like very unique data to potentially build even higher walls around like a lot of their operations. And one of the reasons,
Okay, true.
unfortunately, that I think fintech stagnated, and as I was noting, like I saw yesterday, right, some data around like the reduction in VC funding that's gone into
Yeah.
fintech and is massive. And I think that's because a lot of really smart founders got pulled massively off track by a bunch of like crypto garbage. And so they weren't
Yeah.
actually working on real problems. They were working on essentially like the financialization and tokenization of the universe, which is not something that the world needs. And so as opposed to being like, hey, how do we better like disrupt the Visas and JP Morgans of the world, they spent all their time being like, yeah, how do I better sell this GIF? Right. And that
Yeah.
I think is
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it ended up like taking away some of the momentum that fintech had, for a long
I
time.
agree. I agree for sure. So you and I talk a lot offline about like, where's the market going? What excites us? Is this a bubble? Like who's going to win?
Mhm.
And I like to try to give feedback to founders, especially for people who are building, so that they can differentiate themselves. Do you like what do you think? So I'll give you my opinion on like what I think will truly set you aside today. And that
Yeah.
could change 6 months from now because the
Yeah.
market's moving so quickly. But I think that and what we've discussed is that like technology can become obsolete. Like at a certain point, anyone
Yeah.
will be able to build this tech and like from an infrastructure perspective, a lot of the big companies are going to own it. And so it's hard for small startups to compete from an
Yeah.
infrastructure perspective. They can't pile hundreds of millions of dollars in building LLMs.
Yeah.
But what really stands out from an investor perspective is when companies have a unique customer advantage. Like they really understand a customer
Yep.
problem. Maybe they are that customer, maybe like whatever it is, but it's AI and healthcare, AI and ed tech, AI
Yeah.
and biotech, AI and climate tech. Like that's where I think really interesting opportunities are for the technology, not pure AI. It's you're using AI as a tool to address a larger problem in a
Absolutely.
different industry. What do you think about that?
100%. Right. And I over the last couple of years, right, I alluded to like the difference in reaction that I've gotten from VCs and startups and everyone. I'm like, hey, NVIDIA. And now VCs are like, yes, I want to talk to you more. But over the last sort of year and a half, a lot of VCs have stayed on the sidelines. And once again, the numbers very much bear that out in terms of like the reduction in overall sort of investment that's gone into the space. And it's because eh, they've said directly, we don't really know how to identify the winners here, right? Because like, oh, like this wrapper on GPT versus this wrapper on GPT, how do I differentiate that?
Yeah.
And I find what's the nicest way? Like I have so many VC friends and I don't want to like come down too hard on them. But honestly, like the lack of
Come down
courage.
hard.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah,
it's cowardice.
absolutely the lack
It's
of
absolute
courage.
cowardice. And it's because once again, part of it is they got burned in crypto because they were just chasing
Yep.
money as opposed to like good ideas. But a lot of it is that they don't have the ability, as much as they might like to say that they do, to recognize what is a good business right? What is the like? Where's this market going? Not where's the AI market going? Because AI is not a market. It's not a real thing. Like aerospace is a market, healthcare is a market, logistics is a market, right? And they don't necessarily understand deeply enough the pain points of all those individual industries to understand, okay, like yes, this tool that is automating like the logistics flows in and out of this warehouse using computer vision and then like a whole bunch of like really complex data science to track everything. But yeah, that actually is a multi-billion-dollar problem, and can unbottle a lot of like logistics bottlenecks that add costs onto every other industry that uses logistics, and like all these things just sort of stack up in ways that are logical. And when I look at like the user experience, it makes sense for the workflows of that industry as it exists right now, and it has the ability to actually disrupt those flows. They don't look at the most basic and most important thing. And I tell this to founders every single day. You're not building an AI company. You're building a great business. And that business has to be able to speak really effectively to individual customers. It has to resonate with them so that they're like, oh yeah, this experience flows and it's beautiful. I mean, we've all used, or unfortunately, many of us have used Salesforce. Nobody would ever say like, oh, this flows, right? They've built up a moat, but there's still a lot of people who've been able to come in and like fight against them because like, yeah, we can make this way better. We can make this feel better. Right? I would always argue that what we should be doing in the startup world is creating more natural experiences for human beings because those natural experiences, those are what stick with people. So it doesn't matter what you're doing, you have to be thinking about that aspect of it as you build the business. And those are the companies, wrapper, foundation model, it doesn't matter. However, like deep your technology goes, if you're able to identify with customers and you understand the market that you're in, everything else will flow from that. You will build a great business.
I agree. And, I've worked with founders who, especially like during the last 6 months with any announcement OpenAI makes, people freak
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
right? Like startups are
Yeah.
like, I need a pivot. Like OpenAI is providing education tools. And I'm like, but they don't have schools and teachers and parents as their direct customer. Like they don't
Yeah.
know that customer. They don't care about that customer. You have the ability to stand out and to offer
Yeah.
something way better. And
Yeah.
so I think like a word of advice for founders is, who cares what, like, good, it's good to follow what the big players are doing and see the
Yeah, of course.
trends, but
Yeah.
like they're not going to kill you. They're not going to, if you are truly solving a problem for a customer, you have the
Yeah.
ability to win.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's frustrating though with the VC market right now. Like,
Yeah.
outside of the AI hype is like the VC market's kind of in turmoil. Like it's just so many funds have underperformed. They made bad bets. So many funds are now throwing money at AI, but they also are like, we have no idea what's going to win or what to do.
Mhm.
And so I don't know. It's a little frustrating because it's like people are jumping on this
Very,
bandwagon. Like
more than a
they all
little.
of a sudden, like in the last
Yeah.
6 months, are like, oh, AI, we should now
Yeah.
pivot to this.
Yeah.
And they don't really understand the market or the problem or the technology. And so
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not entirely sure, especially with the VC market. My fear is that many companies will suffer because there's just not enough resources out there for them, with more and more VCs underperforming and shutting down. But I agree with you. Like they need more conviction. We need
Yeah.
investors who are really sharp on specific verticals and technologies and have strong opinions.
And live up to the creed, right? In VC, right? When you work on the space, I used to be on that side of it. Um, there's that thing that you're told from the very beginning when you get it's like, you just gotta like focus on great teams. It's like, okay, well then live up to that, right? Have the courage of your convictions, like actually follow through with that. And then if you invest in great teams where it's like, oh, these founders like at GTC, which is our massive global conference, that happened 2 weeks ago. It's kind of a blur because there was so much going on, but 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, something like that. I met this founder and we're just talking casually and he's telling me about like what they're trying to build. And I was like, wow, that's impressive. Like, it's certainly a use case. It was sort of related to edge computing and things. And he's like, yeah, we're a real team, right? We're serious about this. And he goes through and it's like bunch of like X Stripes and X Googles, and like one of the guys like actually worked with Steve Jobs on like designing of like the iPhone and things like that. And you're like, okay, you'll be fine, right? And just based on your networks and also clearly like what you've been able to accomplish at all these places. And like, okay, so if we believe in founders, but look at them. right? That's a great example. Or look at, somebody who might not have that same background, but has what I always describe as to myself when I'm evaluating from an investment perspective, the single most important element of a founder, which is a deep and unabiding self-awareness. And that is about yourself, what you're capable of, what you want to accomplish, but also about the market that you're operating in. Where it's like I can rattle off like drinking water, right? The key players in the industry, the key problems that they're facing. I know my own core metrics of my company and on a weekly basis because I live and breathe it. Those are the founders where it's like, oh, they're going to be the folks that were helping Steve Jobs design whatever the iPhone of 15 years later, in the future is going to be. Like whatever that is, like those are the types of founders that I look for. And VC should be holding to that. But it like I said, it's some combination of just uncertainty and sort of trepidation about like, oh, do we want to take this risk? And like, I don't know how to differentiate. It's like, well, do the work to differentiate, and then you can probably figure it out.
Yeah, and I think that like over the next 1 to 2 years, we'll see a new venture market. I think that like just VC is going to change. I think
Yeah, it needs to.
the way it operates, right? It's becoming more risk averse. Like investors aren't willing to take as much risk because they're like, oh, we don't want growth at all costs. We want to invest in real businesses. So it's like, well,
Yeah,
finally you figured that out. Which is a big part of why there was this hyper valuation of companies and underperformance, and then it
yeah,
messed things up for all these early stage founders, and because now money from LPs is just drying up. So yeah, I think we'll see a lot of changes coming in the next few years, and I think with that is this AI craze. And so I don't like asking this question, but I kind of want your perspective. I feel like everyone asks it. Is AI a bubble? Is there a bubble right now? And from my perspective, what I'm saying is I think there's a hype bubble. I
yes,
it's here forever. But do you think that like this hype bubble is going to continue for a while? Do you think that like it for some reason it's like the shiny object in the room now? Like every enter Fortune 500 company, every startup,
yeah,
everyone's talking about it. There's still such a deep misunderstanding of what it
yeah.
is and its potential. Like, do you think, yeah, like, is this the next? It's almost it's been like a year, hasn't it, since like Chat GPT was released and people like
Yeah.
lost their minds.
Yeah.
Like, it's been a while and it's still this like crazy hype.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
And
I wonder at what point it kind of quiets down.
I mean that's why I try to always talk about things and not in terms of like, all these AI startups.
Yeah,
Because to me, it's like there's a bunch of great new startups that have a new ability to build cool stuff. There is a hype bubble, that is true. And that is something that unfortunately like we can't control because like that's just like the human nature aspect of things reverberating out through the sort of uncontrolled cloud that is like kind of human emotions. uh but from a functional perspective, I don't think there's a bubble at all. I think we are at the very starting point of adoption where we talk about enterprises and things like that. As the hype bubble created awareness, the adoption is now really starting to pick up on the enterprise side, and industries, especially those industries I would argue that need to figure out efficiency. Like I think about the ad industry, right? Advertising and marketing, and how over the last 15 years they've just been decimated, right? Because all the traditional channels have gone away, like print ads and like traditional cable
yeah,
television, like broadcast ads. Like these things are now you're not seeing any sort of return on them because content has become so completely fractured in so many ways, and Google operates as this gigantic monolith in the space, and the agencies and the brands and the sort of like content creators on the traditional side, they have to be figuring out these tools and they're looking at them. They just don't necessarily have the expertise to build them. And so, as with every industry that's kind of in a position like that, there's going to be a lot of breaking down of those old systems, like a further breaking down. And then those groups that are able to identify, all right, how can I do like super cool startup I met recently? How can I do sort of like um like a more in-depth and meaningful emotional understanding with like a really powerful scientific basis under that when I give somebody an ad that means something to them that they remember.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, that's the type of thing that the ad world would probably love, right? And they're
Oh, I want to
also,
know what this company is.
I'll tell you about it afterwards. Right? They're amazing, right? And awesome founders and so really sharp and like they're deep scientists who also understand that pain of the industry. And so industries will break down, and the ones that get into the sort of AI world, not as part of the hype cycle of like, oh, I need to put this on a quarterly report that we're doing AI stuff, but the ones who are like, I understand the power of this to amplify all of my creative talent, not to save money on cost cut, but to be able to say like, oh, how can I 10x like these amazing artists and writers and all of these people that I have? How can I 10x the operations of a salesperson? Right, so that they're able to have touch points with a whole lot more people a lot more effectively. How can I 10x the work of my radiologists and doctors so that they're able to look at medical imaging? And I think about like, when I try to schedule an appointment, I'm like, oh, I've got this problem, and they're like, yeah, next week or the week after. I'm like, this is painful or unpleasant now, right? It's like, how do we not have an ability for them to support people immediately? Right, and also have those agents or whatever then communicate with the doctors. Hey, this is what's going on with that person, like before everybody comes in. Like, why look at a chart when it's like, okay, what on that chart might not be critical, right? Is an agent and a really specific LLM actually going to understand better what to tell the doctor?
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, this person mentioned 2 years ago that they had high blood pressure, right? Have you checked on that recently? Those are the types of things that, because we're human beings and we're fallible, we can miss, but can massively enhance all these industries where, as opposed to relying on, my own admittedly like challenging ability to remember like, God, oh, that's right, I was supposed to write that email to that person a week and a half ago, right? An LLM's not going to get into that guilt cycle of like, oh yeah, I'll follow, you know what I mean? And so those groups that embrace it are going to see immense gains, and I think we're only on an upward trajectory, but where it starts, that's a more open question, and I'm not able to, I think, be enough of an oracle to predict that.
I love this topic. I think thinking about, right now with AI, there's a lot around efficiency gain. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
we can eliminate some jobs, but we'll also be empowering people to have new jobs. We're going to save time and operate more
yeah,
efficiently rather than hiring lawyers to review all these legal docs. I can just have AI quickly do it and it'll tell
yeah,
me the risks associated.
yeah,
Like really simple things that make sense. But I think to me, what's more exciting is not about like, oh, I can make images easier or
yeah.
faster. I can make videos fast. I don't care about the content stuff. I think it's interesting. But I
Mhm.
think what's truly exciting is like the industries that will change or the massive global problems that we could solve.
Yeah,
You would mention media, and I think that's interesting because it is an industry that's dying, right? Like
yeah,
media is everything to us, right? Like
yeah,
we live and breathe the news and consume this information, but they're struggling to compete with AI or like what the future of AI looks like
yeah,
because there's no business model right now for it. And so, what's fascinating to me about AI is that we will have new business models. It'll reinvent industries.
yeah,
Like some of these industries will just look entirely different. I think media being one of those, it will look
yeah.
different. I met one of the companies from our Chicago program last year had told me that they met a company in Europe who was building a completely AI enabled newsroom. So there's literally zero reporters, zero human interaction. It's all driven by AI. And I was like, wait, that's just like crazy. But I'm like, that actually could be the future of what news looks like. I mean, we can
Yeah.
dissect it if you want, but like there's things like that that are pretty crazy. I, you and I really like talking about stuff around like drug discovery, right? Like biotech,
Yeah.
healthcare is probably one of the areas that will be changed the most by AI in a really positive
Yeah.
way.
Oh, mostly.
I think same with climate technology. But like, I don't know, I get so excited and impatient. Like, why are these things not happening faster?
Systemic
Where,
inertia.
yeah,
It's like humanity's curse. It's a term that I really hope I came up with because I want to own it. But no, like systemic inertia, and Yeah, it goes back to like, oh, why are they not changing, or why have we not figured out a new business model? Because it's like, well, all of the people who came up through every industry came up being given an understanding of a system, right? And to be able to step outside of that system and still serve the customers and clients that you might have in an effective way, and to be able to have that reflected in your organization, that takes a change that is so dangerous and so overwhelming for larger organizations that it will break most of them. And and part of that is because being able to say, okay, I've got to convince not just my customers, hey, we're going to do business in a totally different way, but I've got to convince everybody that has existing operations, right? We don't have, I mean, at least I hope we don't have like, people who are, oh, actually, no, great example. I think of Wall Street, right? And how in the span of 20 years, all of the sort of chaos and wildness that you would see on a trading floor, it's
Yeah.
effectively unnecessary. What is it? 95% of all trading, 97% of
Yep.
all trading has gone completely digital. And so the like runners who have to like take slips
Yeah.
of paper with order information from like call centers to traders on the floor, those don't exist anymore. But that industry figured out a new way to do business, and they still employ thousands and thousands of people.
Yep.
And it's just that they had to be willing to be like, okay, all these folks who have been doing business for 30 years are like, I'm a grizzled old veteran of the trading pits. It's like, well, cool. Like that's awesome that you had that experience. And that's now going away, but there's going to be a totally different experience, and it's going to be a whole lot more people sitting in front of computers, and like that's fine, right? And maybe part of that is the degree of financial motivation that sort of is at the center of something like Wall Street is so overpowering that the leadership at that point was not willing to be like, oh, we're not going to do this even though it makes more money. And I think there might be a lot of industries, healthcare being one of them. And I think the philosophical question around like how like the financial model behind healthcare is a really difficult and important one. But it's also maybe one of the reasons that we don't see that level of innovation because A, you've got massive regulatory and compliance issues that you need to manage from drug discovery, patient interaction, patient data, but also like I don't know that I want my healthcare world driven purely by like, hey, we need to efficiency-ize all of this to
Yeah.
maximize profit. But yet, like that maximization of efficiency is a lot of what AI tools can do. And it's hard to message, I think, sometimes to healthcare professionals, hey, this isn't about just like making it so that an HMO can make more money. This is about making it so that individual patients have the ability to be served more effectively, that we can identify people's sort of life-threatening diseases faster so that we can serve more people, so that we can cut down on the insane costs of just basic healthcare so that we can serve more people, right? That should be enough of a motivation in my mind, but I think that from like an administrative perspective, it just doesn't exist. I think the same exists within like the ed tech space. To some degree, same exists in like construction, where you've got these like large, physically centered organizations that have operated in the same way for 100 years, and like, yeah, why do I need to change? Because like I've got my customers, and like that's fine. And so
Yeah. And I
breaking down
think
that wall, I don't know what that is.
exactly. And I think that's where the struggle is, right? Like,
Yeah,
there is any change people are scared of. People don't
yeah,
want change because it means they could lose their job. It means their business could, look different a year from now. I think the big question for me is, again, it's more philosophical around ethics and like who gets to decide these
yeah,
things.
yeah.
And we've talked about that before. Like OpenAI, just had
Mhm.
announced, what was it, last week, that like, hey, we have this voice cloning tool. We're not going to
Oh,
release it yet because
yeah,
a presidential election's coming up, and so we want to be careful. But at the end of the
yeah.
day, someone else is going to build it if they don't release it, and they will release it, right? So like, it's going to come out at some point. The question is, does all technology need to be created? Anyone can create it, and that's what's scary. So people will, and there's adversarial AI. There are people who create AI for harm. And so who gets to decide, right? Who gets to decide what's right and wrong? My issue, especially as having
Mhm.
served in the federal government, is that like we move
Mhm.
slow, and the regulators, if you and I don't understand all the nuances of AI, there's no way in
Yeah.
hell a policymaker understands its
Yeah.
implications. And so, like,
Yeah.
I think what's so complex now is that the speed at which AI is moving, it's exponentially,
Yeah.
literally. And so, how can you regulate something or make decisions around
Yeah.
ethics and all this when it's just drastically changing? Like every week, something new and crazy happens. And
Yeah.
so, I think the ethics conversation is so important because we don't want people, we don't want biases to exist. We don't want traditionally underserved people to continue to be even more underserved with this technology,
Hmm.
or have harm. But it's so complicated. And if you slow things down, someone had asked me, like, I think like Elon Musk had proposed, like, oh, we should put a pause on all AI development for like 6 months. And it's like, what is that going to
Yeah.
do? Like, that's actually stupid because why slow down the speed of
Well,
innovation?
so that's an
We're also,
impossible idea to ever
you
even
can
consider
control other
enforcing.
people.
Yeah.
Exactly. But also, like, from a federal point of view, like the US as a government is competing with China and Russia. And they're like, we need to beat them in the AI race. So we're definitely not going to
Which
want to
is
stop
a
or slow
weird
down.
idea, right? What does that even mean? Right? Like so like it does because
We have to be number one, Chris.
yeah, but like what is the sort of how would that even like work? Is it like, oh, it is the what they mean is the systems controlled by the national security agencies and things like that like have to be better, or is it just like from a broad
I
economy
think
perspective?
from a breakthrough technology perspective, like one, China's
Yeah,
pumping out AI PhDs like crazy, right? Like
sure.
they built multiple universities specifically for AI.
Yeah.
And so like they just have like we still a few it was like a year or so ago I had recited a stat that it was like basically only 3% of the American workforce is technically skilled to build an AI. So like PhDs, computer scientists.
Yeah,
So we're very understaffed from an AI
sure.
perspective. Like we just don't have a large enough talent pool. And now there's much more talent. Like there's marketing professionals, product people, people who have to like
Mhm.
manage and
But
use these
that goes back to
tools.
kind of what I was alluding to, which is like the most powerful use cases. Like okay, so on a psychology front, right? The folks who are I am a machine learning engineer. I think about all of like these structures and systems to build AI every single day, and that's my world. Those people have an immense talent in a very specific area. But if we make tools more accessible, right? If we take out the, oh, you could really only do this if you're, a 20-year PhD with all of this experience, then you open up opportunities for what in the gaming world we would call like emergent ideas around AI that might not even be thought about by people who have a more structured way of thinking about what AI can do. Where it's like, okay, if we make tools available to those product people and to those marketing people or to healthcare professionals in ways that resonate with them and how they work and how the problems they're trying to solve, we're going to come up with solutions that even if the tools aren't perfect for it, we'll figure out workarounds, right? And that I think is one of the unique things about like um, that we often forget. Is forget the right word or just misunderstand? I think we misunderstand that like yes, having technical talent is critical. Being able to build foundation models and understanding like how you manage the data goes in, how you do the weighting and all of that like is critical, but how it gets used in the real world isn't really done by all of the PhDs, right? Even at ChatGPT, it exploded not because it didn't exist and people didn't understand sort of the how these models could be used, but because then it went out into the world and people really were like, oh, there's so much that I could think about doing with this. And that's why I'm actually excited about all the layers. And so I
Yeah.
don't worry about like this national competition that is in some ways like reflective of our very ancient like tribal thinking around like, our tribe has to beat that tribe. Instead, I'm like, yeah, there's going to be some smart kid in Uganda who uses ChatGPT in some way that I've never thought about, and like that's awesome, right? And it's not that he built ChatGPT, it's that he had an understanding of problems that are unique to circumstance and place and just a divergent way of thinking. that's where the power comes from. And that's also the reason I don't worry too much about like being overtaken, because I think that we should
Yeah.
always, create opportunity for people to undo old systems, especially if those old systems have stagnated and ossified to a point that they're not really effectively serving the people that they're supposed to be serving.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think from a federal perspective, like as a nation, we want to
Yeah,
lead in industries of the future. We want to lead in
sure.
quantum and climate technology. Like we want to solve problems, and that does require people with education. But it
Mhm.
also doesn't mean that like you can't go build the future of health tech and AI if you're not a PhD. Like you could be
Yeah,
have zero college degree and just be a brilliant developer and learn it
yeah,
on your own. Like by all means, and I agree with you. I think like there is going to be a democratization of this technology so that anyone anywhere can do interesting things that we haven't even thought about. Like that's what's really fascinating about the space is probably like 90% has not been uncovered yet of what this technology can actually do and the problems
oh,
it could solve.
absolutely. Yeah,
And I
because
that's
it's going to
what's
continue to
really
evolve.
exciting.
It becomes more
Yes.
multimodal and like all of these different areas. Yes, absolutely. And that's the part where I'm like, oh, like I mean, you probably are saying like even with Calendly, right? The amount of time that we spend doing basic things like management of our lives, management of just like the
Yeah.
basic, like, hey, I've got a bunch of emails that I really got to figure out like who in this should I respond to, and who can I like put off, and what is promotional, and like we've got basic analytic systems. But I would really want like another version of me where I can be like, hey, can you
Yeah,
just respond
exactly.
to these like 100 emails in a way that understands me, that understands how I write, that understands, what the type of answer that I would give to a specific question. That would allow me to do things like, yeah, like let's do a webinar like this every day. Let's do more like, events where I can meet up with individual startups and understand their problems. Let's do more, focus on more sort of partnerships and collaborations with groups that have the ability to help startups. Like I would love to have the bandwidth to do all of that stuff, but a lot of my stuff is taken up by operations, and
Yeah.
that's where like I think there's going to be a huge opportunity. So I'm excited about those things because I think that they end up being a net positive once we have that like shakeout period of like, oh, this was a weird thing that didn't work at all, and this was a weird thing that didn't work at all, and there's another 100 that sort of fall into that category, but these five all address these really amazing problems. Like, oh, that's a brilliant way of dealing with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, what I think is lucky for us is that, you and I are both entrepreneurs and investors, and we've been in the space for a long time helping founders through accelerator programs. And so,
Yeah,
like, right now, especially, we get to geek out and see some of the craziest, coolest stuff. And like every day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I never even thought of that. That's incredible. Like,
yeah,
it's really exciting to see what experts and people who have some domain knowledge are able to do because like that most of us wouldn't think of it, so I'm
yeah.
that's what's been an honor and a privilege to be able to work with some of these great companies who are going to change the world. um so I want to make sure we have time for questions. There's a
Sure.
chat function, you guys can post things. Jessica or Anthony, do have there been any questions from the audience that we should hop into, or should we continue the conversation?
Yep, Trisha, you can find it in the Q&A button below. There should be quite
Oh,
a few.
oh, there is one. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
was
no
looking at
worries.
chat and I was like, I can't keep up with it. Okay.
Oh yeah, we got a bunch from here.
We got tons.
Yeah.
All right. All right, let's start with one for NVIDIA. How is NVIDIA
Sure.
looking forward to seeing their technology integrated? Is there a gap they think is not being currently addressed? I don't know
That's a
what
really
that fully
broad
means. It's broad.
question. Um, I mean, we're as we kind of alluded to at the start, we're involved in just about every industry and supporting them in ways that are specific to that industry. So I'd say NVIDIA, we don't position ourselves as like, we're going to, you get into X or Y or Z. We're always going to be, hey, here's the tools that allow you, the expert in that industry, to build the systems and new sort of ways of new business models that we were talking about earlier, to address these problems. So like we always like to think of ourselves as Switzerland, which is like, hey, we want to enable everyone. And then we want people who are really experts in specific industries to solve those problems using the enablement tools that we've given them. So I don't think that we look at it as like having a gap. Like, it's just like, no, there's lots of different ways that people are going to solve problems, and we'll support them however that sort of comes about.
All right. I like this question. It's one that we get a lot. Will Gen AI replace more human jobs than it creates for people? Um, when I was a White House fellow, I did a lot of work on like how we think about jobs and AI. This was before the hype. So like they had mentioned an example around like replacing human coders and developers. Like, so
Yeah.
let's talk about GitHub's Copilot, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's an amazing tool that is not designed to replace developers. It's not at a point where it could possibly replace a developer. It
Yeah.
is a tool that empowers developers, gives them more knowledge, and enables them to move faster. So if anything, it's just going to enable the business to be more efficient and more productive. So I think what data tells us, all these predictions in the market from the macro perspective, is that like AI is actually going to create so many more jobs. So like, the best case scenario is, look, we have all these like warehouses, we're replacing them with robots. Who's going to manage those robots? Who's going to code those robots? Who's going to manage them on the floor? Who's going to manage the user interface? So like, it's actually creating way more jobs than just that one person who was managing the conveyor belt. But these are dangerous jobs, and now we can upskill that person, and they can be the one who's managing the robot instead.
Yeah.
So data is telling us that we're going to create way more jobs than actually lose. What do you think,
Good,
Chris?
good. I think good leaders recognize the power to amplify the skill sets of of the people that they have on their teams. And bad leaders might try and like take shortcuts and be like, oh, like as I know, yeah, how about we just like figure out like, oh, can I just cost cut all of this away and I never have to, and then I'll just save a bunch of money and Wall Street will love me, right? They're going to love you for like 2 years, and then those people who have amplified, right, their employees and their sort of builders with AI driven tools, and now they're able to do more, they're able to serve more people, they're able to serve people faster. Those are the companies that are going to pass them by, because you cut all of the expertise that you had, people who actually understood how your business operates, how your industry operates, as opposed to empowering them and enabling them. And I've heard the same with coders, where it's like, yeah, it allows you to get feedback way more quickly, to understand like, hey, what is going wrong here? Like, why is this not like coming out the way I wanted to? And I think that's one of the things that people miss far too often, is like, yeah, you should be looking at these things as, how do I make, as I said, my life easier? How do I make what I do faster so that I can
Yeah.
focus on the things in my job that I love, as opposed to things in my job that I don't love?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is, I want to answer this question because I think it's funny. Will Gen AI replace lawyers? Definitely not, because as humans, we're dumb and we enjoy throwing money at lawyers. So forever we will just waste money.
Well,
No,
but
definitely
also
not.
it gets to a really, really critical point. Like, it does not matter how good AI is.
Yeah.
Our brain chemistry is different when we sit down in person and talk to each other than it is when we're on a Zoom. And that's because we're always going to exist in meat space, which means we will always need, as I think, a set, like, as important as like water and air, we need human relationships. We, like, human beings cannot exist without relationships. Like, we go mad, like we break down, like we have to have human relationships and human interaction. And so there will never be a time when there is not an opportunity to sit down with a lawyer. And what lawyers do a lot of the time is they're helping people like alleviate their fears or their worries or this thing that hurt them, and they're trying to, I will help you with the solution to that. And that doesn't ever go away, right? And
Yeah.
maybe it's a way to like, hey, like, let's automate like contracting and things like that, like things that can be automated. There's some cool companies doing exactly that. But like lawyers and other areas where we misunderstand the foundations of what they do. A doctor oftentimes is as much a soother of emotions and a comforter than they are a scientist, right?
I
And
agree.
I think that applies across industries.
Yeah, I think that these are not, we're never going to replace humans with AI. Never. Like, won't be a situation where that happens. It is purely it's almost like a steroid for a human. It makes us do our job a million times better, I think. Like, right? It enables
The
us to
it
focus on the
should,
things we're
yeah,
really good at. We're really
yeah,
good at and what we care about. So for doctors, for lawyers, we probably would
yeah,
just be even better at those jobs then.
yeah, 100%.
Uh, so there's a few questions about the Techstars Chicago AI program I want to
Yeah.
emphasize. So we are in open applications right now. So Jessica has been posting links, I think, for the program. You can reach out to myself. She'll also post my LinkedIn here. Reach out to me, connect with me. We want to hear what you're building. As we've said, like everyone is AI. If you are touching the technology, if you're a deep tech company, everything from dual use, defense technology, robotics, climate technology, biotechnology, if you're not sure if this is the right fit, still reach out to us. We want to talk to you. Applications are open now. They close end of May or mid-May. The program runs hybrid, 3 weeks in person in Chicago. NVIDIA and JP Morgan are our partners. So you're going to work alongside other brilliant minds who are building in the space. We help you with everything from fundraising to building a company culture to creating FOMO when you talk to investors to perfecting your pitch story. Techstars is a 3-month accelerator. You work super closely with us. I become like a partner to you and continue to help you grow and scale your business and hopefully exit and make massive impact. So reach out to us, apply. Anthony is also on the call, who is running the program, and you can ping him directly. He wants to meet you and learn more. So we've got like 3 minutes. Chris, did you want to do any plugs before we hop off, or should we answer some more questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that somebody had one of your colleagues had put our application link in there for the Inception program earlier. Like that, every startup that is building AI specific tools, like you should sign up for Inception. As hopefully you get accepted into Techstars, we'll be able to help you access some tools and supports from NVIDIA, and then you'll be able to understand how to really apply them from a business perspective, through Tricia's program. So I look at everything that we do as very much complementary to everything else that you're doing as you try and build your business, and definitely apply. If you write to, hey, our alias, which is inceptionprogram@nvidia.com, note like, hey, I was watching the webinar, and that will sort of bring to our attention, because we've got a significant log of folks who've applied, and if you're like, yeah, I'm building an AI company and this is what we're doing, this is how I found out about it, we can sort of bump you up on the list and get that looked at faster.
Awesome. So check out NVIDIA Inception program, check out Techstars Chicago AI and Deep Tech Accelerator. Feel free to reach out to us. We want to be of value and help support the ecosystem and you on your journey. Chris, we got 2 minutes left. If you were to leave the audience with a thought on AI, anything or everything, what would you say?
I would say that, it's I alluded to it in a few different ways, but the most important thing that I always tell founders is to remember that you're not building a really neat technology experiment. You're building a company, right? And everything that you do should be centered around, how do I build a company that people want to use what we've created and that makes their lives better and easier? And so, first and foremost, your technology is important, but it's not the most important thing you do as a startup founder. And so, as you're going out there into the world, always keep in mind that your technology will only get you so far. It will only be so much of a moat. There's always going to be smarter people out there building cooler technology. But if you have a better understanding of who you're talking to, how you're sort of solving their pains, then that's the thing that's going to put you sort of apart from the pack, and hopefully that will drive you to success.
It's like we're the same person. I'll echo. So I'll leave with AI is a tool. It is not a silver bullet. Remember, as a startup founder, customer. That's the only thing that matters. If you can't solve
Yep.
the problem for a customer, and if you don't know who your customer is, then you're going to be wasting your time. So put all your energy into that customer, build empathy around them and the problems that they have. And if you do that, you will build and become a great founder. So
Absolutely.
thanks everyone so much. Chris, you're amazing. As always, it's a
You're
pleasure to
awesome.
talk and hang
Thanks so
out with
much.
you. Everyone for joining, thank you so much. Ping us, use the links. We really appreciate you. We'll do another one of these again in the future. Hopefully something crazy will happen in AI and we can go talk about that. We really appreciate your time for joining us on your afternoon on a Wednesday. Have a
Thanks,
great
everybody.
rest of your day and week. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, NVIDIA.
This
Thanks,
is awesome.
Anthony and Jessica and Karina. Thanks, everyone.